John from Eastern Hot Rodder, and today we're going to work on getting this gas tank changed out of my dad's old Corvette so we can get this thing back on the road. The gas tank, we sumped it, but the sump was in the wrong spot, and I came across a Tanks USA gas tank that was set up for one of these, and I just got a drop-in fuel pump that'll handle up to 1100 horsepower. So we're going to redo the fuel system in this car and hopefully get this blown big block working good so we can start driving it reliably again. This thing hasn't run good in like a year and a half. And last time I started it, it was farting and banging and popping. It didn't want to hold an idle or anything. And now it's sitting here running like it should. I don't know why, but you can see how long it's been sitting. The front tires are soft even. So we got almost all the gas out of it. And then we're going to push it in on the lift. And we said, well, let's see if it'll start. And here it is. Dad built this car originally as a pro street and had a two 4-barrel setup that sat just out of the hood. In the back, it'll hold up to a 31/18.5, but he put a 10-inch rim on it, one with these Mickeys on the back, and one with more of a gasser type look with it than the pro street. And he built his own ball joint spacers and lifted the front end up to give it that gasser stance, and then decided to go with the blower motor. And it's been kind of nothing but trouble since he put the blower motor in. So he pulled it apart, redid it, found a few things in it, went through it, changed the distributor a few times, finally moved the magneto. He always wanted to run that in here, so now he's got the magneto in there. And when we put the magneto in, it fired right up and everything seemed to be good. And then it gave us trouble. So what was happening is it would start up cold like this, warm up no problem, and then once you shut it off, you couldn't get it to start. So we messed with the regulator, and I couldn't back the fuel pressure down enough, and it wouldn't go below 7, but now it's sitting there right at 5, no trouble at all. So maybe it was a stuck regulator, but we're going to change the regulator, put a nice bypass regulator in that'll be fuel injection ready in case we ever decide to do that with it. Check out some of the work that's in here. It's pretty cool. 4-link. It's all Art, he used Art Morrison for the rear suspension. Made his own cross members and everything. It's just a cool car, tried and true. It just needs a little bit of updating. There's the gaping hole where the gas tank used to be. To get it out, I had to take the cap off, disconnect the exhaust to drop that down. I had to take the pickup tube and the sending unit out. I'll show you. I had to take that sending unit out, and I had to take the shutoff valve I had in there out to make sure that I had enough room to clear that frame. And you can see here's the tank versus the stock one, and they are the same height, even though there's a taper to it. You can, if I turn around, it'll be the same. And the only difference is they set a recess in here to put the electric fuel pump in the sender. Now we're going to be changing these two out because we need the 3-wire sender for the 64 gas gauge to work correctly. You can see here's the 3-wire hookup. So you got a ground and then the 2 leads to read the ohmage of there's the ground right there. And the new pump, or the new sender, I'll show you that one. Right here. And it's got the 3-wire hookup. So it goes in nice and tight, which is going to be good because that's going to fit right where this one goes. Boop, drop right in. And it's for this tank. And it should work out pretty good. So I think one of the problems was, my buddy Ron pointed it out, the original 3/8 fuel line, not original, my dad replaced that, but originally that goes into the bottom of the tank, and we were using that as a return. So I think what might have been happening, because we couldn't drop the fuel pressure enough, that when the tank was full, the column of gas might have been pushing on this, and it could not return enough through that 3/8 line into the tank because it was pushing up into the bottom. So now everything's going to be feeding out of the top like it should be. I think this will probably take care of our problem with this car, and we'll be able to be cruising it again. So here we are working on the gas tank, and this is just set in. I still got to set the pump and stuff, but I was setting it for orientation. So the lines, this looks like it would pour over here good, but there's a bulkhead here on the Corvette that would keep that from passing the lines through. So the lines have to go over this way and come through this spot here. So what I'm going to do, I thought I could use these here, but I'm going to have to order some 45s and get them all to run together and bring them over this way. I made this piece out of wood. If you buy these tanks new, they come with a bracket. I didn't like the idea of metal sitting on top of there. The brackets are metal from them, but this tank strap goes right over the top of it like that. So I didn't want to put the pressure on the sending unit. It might not have touched, but I think it probably would have when I cinched it down. I probably could have just done a block on this side and not worried about the other side, but I just had a scrap piece of wood, so I cut it so it gets the clearance it needs for the sending unit, and then gave it a couple coats of paint to seal it off, keep it away from the elements. Not that we're driving this in the rain too much, but I did want to keep it and preserve it as long as I could. Shaped it a little bit, give it a squirt, and then stuck it down with some weather strip adhesive. It just has to hold itself in place. It doesn't have to bolt down or anything like that. I'm going to extend these leads. The bracket that holds the tank in runs underneath the tank, so I'm going to try to get everything that comes on top of the tank run down and hanging down lower than the tank itself, so I can do easy hookups underneath and then secure the wiring and the fuel lines. Before we can cut this to length, we have to get the sock on the fuel pump, and that was a little tricky because it has this little ring on there that stays on there. What I did is I heated it up a little bit with a heat gun and pressed it on there, and it's got this locating pin, and that washer was a little pain in the butt, the little flower-shaped washer. You can't really get in there because this is in the way, so I kind of pushed it out of the way the best I could, and I just used a flat screwdriver and kind of forced it on over there. I didn't clamp it in the vise, but I set it in the vise to hold it, and just kind of worked my way around to get that down there. So that's on there. So now we can make our measurement from this part here to here, and this part will slide off, and then this tube will get cut back till it slides down there. We want to set that to the depth of the tank. So we're going to measure in here to find out how deep that is and make the overall length of this fit the whole thing. So it's 9 1/8. Let's make sure. 9 1/8 is what we got from this flange, counting this whole entire thing to the end of this sock. So the next thing we're going to do now is tighten this clamp up and wrap this whole thing up. So once I get that unpacked, I'll show you. So I put this rubber insulator around here, goes around the pump, and then it's the sleeve, and then you put the hose clamp around it. Tight fit, but it goes right in. So that's what you want. Okay, so we got our pump all set. We got our insulation around it there to keep, the vibration thing. We got it zip tied together. We got our sock on there. We got our depth set. Plugged in our wiring harness here. It's just a weather pack connector like a GM would use. And then these wires are going to feed through these special nuts here that are gasketed, which apparently once you tighten them up, there's supposed to be a pretty good seal here. I might put a little bit of something on them just to be on the safe side, but they feed up through like this. You want to leave a little bit of extra wires so you're not pulling and chafing on it. Directions say to do that, but we would normally do that anyway. And this wiring harness, because the depth of the tank is pretty shallow, it must be compared to some other ones, it has plenty of room of wiring down here going to the pump itself. So I'm going to probably put another zip tie around this just to kind of secure the whole package together, so when I'm putting this pump in, I don't have to worry about it snagging and getting caught on anything as it drops down into the tank. And we'll do that. You can see we got a little bit of extra there. This curls up around here. One little zip tie on there will hold that. So I'll grab another zip tie for that there. We got our leads here, which are gonna be plenty long enough. These will go out. They'll probably, I don't know if I'll follow the fuel line out and around or if it'll just come off the tank here. It's pretty tight here on the floor. So I don't know if that'll end up fitting there or not. But we wanna get this packaged in here as tight to this as we can. So that way, when it drops down in, none of this is gonna be snagging on the tank. I might actually spin this around here and tuck it in a little better. But that's ready to drop in with a little bit of space there. Now these nuts, they say tighten them up a little bit until it just snugs down on these wires, and then go just a little bit more. Actually, what it says here, use a 9mm wrench to tighten the upper jam nut on the wire pass-through in quarter-turn increments until the wire no longer moves up and down. Be careful not to over-tighten the fitting. This could break the fitting and cause a leak. So we put the goopy stuff on there and put the sending unit in. I got one of the fittings in. This is for the supply. I wrote it on here because it's actually marked on the sending unit itself, but by the time you put the fitting in, you won't be able to see it. It's kind of, I guess you kind of can see it, but I just figured marker it on there. Also, I want to point out that we put a Teflon tape on the threads here because this is just a pipe fitting, so there is no seal. So you want to make sure you put a gas-friendly Teflon seal on there. These, I'm tempted to kind of put a little bit of that blue stuff in here to seal that off because I feel like, I mean, it's holding, and I guess it's supposed to, but I think I'm going to put a little bit of the blue goo in there to seal that off. All right, so I'm going to show you a cool little tool. It's actually called a cool tool. Let's see if that's in the video there. Right there, you can see it. This is for the Dash 8. This is to assemble AN line. Now, we're not using the kind that's coated or anything, but if you ever have, you know how much that can be literally a pain in the fingers. So what this does is this neat little tool like this, and the fitting fits in there like this. And it's got a stop there if you need it, but this one I had to take the stop out to make that fit in there good. And this fits in like that. And you just clamp it in a vise like that to keep it apart. And then lube up your hose. I'm using a little WD-40 on this one. Don't want too much on there. And just shove it in. Now what's cool about these, especially on the bigger, the small AN stuff is even harder to put together. But what's nice about these big ones, I've used these by hand. Like when I was doing this on the gas tank, I've held it in my hand and just forced it in there. It gives you just a lot more grip. And when you get it in, it should be it. We can check. Yep. You can see that's seated it down inside there. So now we have this on there, and all we have to do is assemble the hose now. So that can be held back on there like this to give you a nice grip to start it onto the fitting, which is what we're gonna end up doing here. If I can fit it on this, is gonna be awful tight. I might have to just work this one by hand high enough. So we got our hoses assembled. They're gonna come around here, and that gets us out past the tank. So when this is up in the car, we got a couple fittings to get to. So here we have our return line. I did that one as a male, so it can't get confused with the supply line, which I did in a female. The other difference is also this is a Dash 8 going all the way up, you know, returning from the carburetors back to the tank, and this bells out to a Dash 10, so it's a 5/8 line, and it's gonna run up into the, we'll do a short line up into the filter, and from the filter we'll go up, feed a finer filter up by the carburetors, and get this whole system set up. And so I'm gonna extend these wires on the sending unit. Make sure we solder them all around real good to get a good permanent connection. And If they're a few inches longer, I probably wouldn't have to do this, but they are what they are. Not flowing there real good. And I gotta extend those down, and then we're gonna add it to this, which is a 3-ganger, but I color coded it so it'll go to our white one here when this is extended. That way it gets all our wiring down where I can plug in the gas gauge with a nice weather pack. We're gonna do the same thing with the 2-ganger for our fuel pump, so we'll be able to unplug it and disconnect the fuel lines and drop the tank in the future if we need to. Get it over there. Nice permanent connection now. Professional looking. Got the hoses protected with some stuff. I put a piece of plastic along this edge here, it's door edge guard. That's what I have left over of it. And I set that on the edge there, so that way there's protecting around the push lock hoses and also on the edge there, so it will not chafe through. We don't ever have to worry about poking a hole in our hose at all. And we got nice protected wires, so this should go in nice and professional and be trouble-free until it isn't, I guess. All right, guys. Well, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to show you, but I started putting this thing in. It was fighting me, and I got sidetracked and didn't set the camera up. But we got the tank in. So what I did is I took these feed lines and I stuck them up over the frame rail. See where the vent tube's still overhanging on that side. And I fed everything that way to give myself the clearance I need here. There's plenty of room up here for the wiring. You see it dances around in there, no problem, once the tank's in. But when it's there, it comes up. They had to take the cap off, and it scraped right there, so I had to touch that up. And it was left corner in first, and then it kind of went up and in and settled in where it needed to be. Then I had to hold it up, put this cross member back in, and start the hold down strap, so it's in there nice and tight now. Put the battery shut off switch back in, and I hooked up the return line. This is gonna get fastened up in here, so it keeps it up out of the way. Up top, I have to put in this boot that goes around the tank, and that's the drain. I'm also gonna knock a hole in this boot so I can put the vent tube in, because that'll make sure it's higher than the fill, so we're not filling it up and then leaking fuel all over the place, and because that wouldn't be cool. And this is, just stuck this boot in here. It sits around this edge and fits up under there, and then boots around the tank like this, and then it's got a drain hole in it that you center towards the rear. There we go. So that way if you overfill it or spill in there or whatever, it runs down a hose and drips out on the ground. So then I cut a little slot in there and fed the return line, the vent tube, in here. And I was gonna trim it off, but I'm just gonna leave it like that. I'll put a filter on there so that way it doesn't suck a lot of stuff in, but it'll just sit right down in there, and I think that'll keep it out of the way for the gas cap. The gas cap's pretty big on these. There's that. So vent tube vents into here, which still gives it plenty of, that's not completely sealed off anyway. And that'll work pretty good. That's a cool looking gas cap. This is gonna be moved over to this side here of the battery box, so it'll be out of the way still, and make room for our Gigundo filter, which will bolt to the center of the battery box, and that way everything's up out of the way, nothing's hanging down from behind the car. You won't really see any of this stuff. It'll look better this way. So I'm gonna take this battery out so I can do the welding on the box on a workbench instead of hanging up in the air with gas lines and everything, so it'll be a little safer that way. So 3 9/16 bolts. My dad, when he built this car, he made it so the sandwich is on there and they're welded on the top. The bolts pass through, and you can take the whole battery tray out and down and drop that. So I'm going to take that out, and we'll see you on the workbench. Yeah, not bad for a guess. So that's going to keep us, there's plenty of room there for that battery in there. So I'm going to drill these and put the bolts in from the back side like we did before, so that way the bracket will be nice and flush to this when it's done. This will get tightened up like this.
So here I clamped this little holder onto the frame here so it can hold our wires nice and sturdy, so when I'm soldering it, it'll give us a good soldering connection and keep it nice and thin. So this is the ground wire we're tying in. We also have to do the power wire and then the sending unit wire. So the sending unit wire on the 64 Corvette is this tan wire, and this black wire with a pink stripe is the power wire. So the black and with the pink stripe is going to go to the red, and the tan is going to go to this black one here that I marked with a white shrink tube up top. And that'll finish our wiring. We can tuck that up there, and then it's onto the fuel line to figure out how we're going to route that. So put this hose together. This end's going to feed from the tank and go up to our filter. So we put the push lock fittings, and I got the band clamps on there. I don't want to go too tight with those because some sites say if you go too tight, it could actually hurt the integrity of the thing. So I used Figaro, I believe it was called, and I used their band clamps and everything, so they should all work together. So that's going to get tightened up just right there, and then we're going to mount that in there. That'll get us to our filter. Once that part's done, we got to start working our way up through the frame rail up towards the front of the car. So we're feeding the 5/8 line, big old cobra snake of a fuel line, up over this rear end. We're following where the 1/2-inch line's going, and we're gonna secure it as we go. But what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna run this sucker all the way up to the front to make sure we have enough, and terminate this end so we have the one we're gonna have back here. And I'm sure we're gonna have enough. We've got our dash 10 45 degreer, and we're gonna try to force this on here without having a workbench. So I used a liberal amount of WD-40. And a lot of pushing. We're going to try to get that sucker to seat all the way down before we put anything else on it. Oh boy. I don't want to hurt this thing either. Let's see. All the way up, a little plastic ferrule, rubber ferrule goes there to give it a nice finished look. And then this guy will get clamped on there, and that'll finish that one off. So we'll do that one a pinch, and we'll fasten that, and we'll just start working from the back to the front on the fuel line. See how these clamps work. I'm using the same clamp they use for PEX. I just don't squeeze it as hard as you would for PEX. Put it in there to keep it nice and close. As soon as it gives me some resistance, oops, I leave it. Snake this up. Give it a tug, there we go. And look at that. Sweet. That 45 shot that angle over there pretty nice. Gives us all the room we need. And we'll just tighten that up there. And we are actually done at the back of the car, other than securing a few spots with some tie wraps and stuff to make sure we're not going to interfere and rub through our fuel line as we go up. So it comes up there. Got everything up out of the way. It's tucked in tight up along there. It comes down the rail. Clears this. We got a bracket holding the fuel line back. Comes in. Got these clamps here. Keeps it off the transmission lines, so it's not going to be heat sinking the tube. A couple zip ties to kind of hold things up out of the way. And this is sloppy here because we have to go up top to finish that. But this is going to be plenty of clearance here. Don't have to worry about anything hitting. And then it's going to carry up top, and we'll tie it in with the fuel filter and regulator up top. After looking at our routing options up top, I decided to move the filter down under here. Keeps it hidden where you don't see this big, ugly, bulky thing. But it's still easily accessible. It's not exactly where I would like to have it, but it makes it easy. It's right there. It's got plenty of airspace. You can see where you don't have to worry about anything. Our lines are protected. They're in there tight. I got these aluminum brackets that attach them to the tranny line, so you can see the fuel line's not on the tranny line. And there's an airspace there, so I won't heat sink from the transmission fluid. And we run up here nice and tight, and this part here will actually It's hard to reach up here, but I'll get that from the top. Pull this hose up farther and it'll stay tight with. Oh, let's see if I can get in there. The regulator we're using is one from Trick Flow. It's made by Aeromotive. What's nice about this one is you can change the spring. Right now it has the carbureted spring in. It'll be good for 0 to 8 pounds. If we change the spring, then I can put electronic fuel injection on the car. So we're making the system so it'll handle whatever we ever decide to do with this car. It'll be just a matter of changing the spring to go injection. So our inlet's coming in, this big old dash 10. Our return is going to be this dash 8 on the bottom, and our feed's going to be a dash 8 up top here. So originally my dad had the regulator. He built or tapped a little hole here and had a little bracket that he made that mounted the regulator there. If I do that I could just modify that bracket and do that, but I don't like how down low that feed line is. You can see that misalignment there. So I'm going to raise that up a little bit. And when I do, I don't want that just sitting on 1/4 inch bolt. So I'm going to get this set there, and then I'm going to cut this bracket here, modify it so it'll tie into this bolt right here that holds the idler on. And that way the regulator is going to be nice and secured with 2 bolts instead of just the 1 mounting point. And it'll hold it up out of the way. You can see everything snakes up out of there. It gets nice and close, but it's still far enough away where it'll feed in. Cut this bracket off there, and I cut this little piece of 1/4 inch round rod, and that's going to actually tuck right in there pretty nice. So we're going to clamp it on there and weld it, and then just weld it to the bottom there. I marked it with a Sharpie, so I'm hoping I can weld it on there and then bring it up to my house and weld it, because I don't have my welding helmet here, and I don't really want to weld around the carburetors and fuel lines. A lot of assembly, disassembly, reassembly when you're building something custom like this. Here's the bracket. Sprayed it silver so it'll blend in good with the lowercase, and it should line up. And we drove through my woods to get back down to the barn to take a little bit more time so I don't get fingerprints on it. Say you just drive me down through. This is a good spot, sage right here. So that should be dry by now. Okay, so there's that bracket bolted on. Put a little pike nut on there. It looks pretty good. Still got to do this and hook up our lines, but I want to make sure that we clear our hood because it's pretty close right there. So we're going to see. That's clearing fine. It's got like 3/4 of an inch, I guess, maybe 1/2 inch. Yeah. Fuel line is hooked up. We got the return line hooked up, and now we just have the feed line to do, and then we got to fill it with gas and check it for leaks, and hopefully we fire this thing up. So I got lucky. I had this dash 8 hose made up with a 90 on it already. I just have to cut it to length and put a straight on there. So I'm going to mark that with a Sharpie and cut it and fit it. All right, so I got that hose made up. I wish I had a better fitting. That one was kind of beat up. I might have to change the hose out one of these days. But that's all done. We're got everything all hooked up and tightened up there. Everything's good to go. So went out, got 5 gallons of gas. We're gonna dump it in the Vette and see if we can start it up. We're showing on the gauge 9 pounds. Okay, I gotta back that off. Tighten one leak, and now we got 7 pounds. That's right where I want it to be. Okay, I want to check underneath it one more time, look for any kind of leaks underneath, and then we'll probably be good. So we'll put it up in the air. How's that? Was that leaking anymore? Had to snug up this big old dash 10 here, was leaking there. It's still wet, but I think it's from re-snugging it. So hopefully that's all it is. So I'll have to keep an eye on that one. That was a pretty big drip there.
It's still just wet from the other leak.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I didn't see anything else before.
Yeah, it seems okay right now. So we'll see. It's still got pressure on it. So we're gonna put it up in the air and check for leaks underneath. Dry there, dry there, dry there, dry there. That's good. All right. Come up to our, this is dry. This is dry, right? We're good. Let's give it a shot. 7 1/4. I can't remember. Okay, I was getting good. Well, the battery was getting weak, so I pulled the air cleaners off, gave it a shot of ether, and it fired right up. And it's almost idling already. It's idling. Wow, it's running way you freaking kidding? That's the weirdest thing. It just shuts off. I don't know, when it started, the thing revving up good and everything. And then it just stops. Let it sit for a minute and we'll see if it fires again. It was weird, like it wasn't starting, it was doing the same thing, just turn, and then I hit the key and it backfired horribly. That was weird, just shut off. Two is I pulled the plug out and checked, and the plug is the magnetos throwing a very weak spark. So now we're back to thinking it's distributor. The good news is we know the fuel system's good because it's delivering fuel at the right pressure, it's returning fine. Why it's getting weak like this, I don't know, it just shut off like that. We checked, it was very, very weak spark. So I guess we're gonna maybe get another Petronics to stick in the original tack drive distributor and put it in, or something. We'll figure something out, but we'll get there.